Good evening to everybody. It is a lovely opportunity to see familiar faces and unfamiliar faces. My name is Bob Porter, as you can see, and I run an organisation called Brandenburg, and our orchestra has played with Stephen a few times, and with your choir, Stephen. And right next to me is a man called Matthew Buswell, who is the vocal consultant of the Brandenburg Camino project, which is our lockdown project. And this tonight is an event part of that project, and it's just an opportunity for me to pin Stephen against the wall and get all his best ideas about how we are going to perform the Brahms, for example, and nick them all. So that's what we do. So Stephen, I'm going to ask you now to introduce yourself to the people who don't know you. My first question is,
The answer to that, when I joined Equity, when I was a member of the Glyndebourne Chorus, there was already another Stephen Brown. So I had to add my middle name in order to be able to join. It was that simple. And it stuck. And I think it's all right. It's quite nice to be a bit unusual. Separates me from the other Stephen Browns, of which there are many. You should see it when I try to borrow a library book. It took them ages to find.
So you and he are socially distanced.
Well, he's a tenor in Florida, I think. Stephen Mark Brown. He agreed to put his middle name in as well.
Oh, nice. Okay, so please tell. We've got as I said, we've got a mixture of Camino people and who are these people, Stephen, that you brought along with you?
I'm really very lucky because I get to conduct two choirs, and one of them is the choir that you've met before, which is the Allegri Singers, which is a chamber choir based in Bromley in South London, a very good choir. And we did a St. John Passion, and we had the Brandenburg Orchestra come to play. So that's how, in fact, actually partly how we got to know each other, I think, Bob. And then we've obviously performed in the Brandenburg Festival as well. So I'm delighted to see so many friendly and familiar faces from the Allegri Singers. The other choir I conduct, although haven't yet, because I got the position during lockdown, is the Sussex Chorus, which is a very large choir based over the whole of Sussex, but they rehearse in Burgess Hill. We've been able to do a sort of social discussion every Monday night, and even a bit of singing warm-ups and practice to try to keep our voices from going rusty. So I'm hoping that that some of the Allegri Singers and the Sussex Chorus might like to come and join you for some of your adventures online. So I'm glad to see so many here.
That's lovely. Okay. Now, you are a man of many talents, two of which are singing and conducting.
Yes, well, that's nice of you to say.
How does that sort of fall into place in your mind?
Well, I think actually that all conductors should have singing lessons. I think they need to understand how music breathes, whether people are blowing down a clarinet or bowing a violin. Breathing is so important to music. It's phrasing. I mean, you can be very musical and a great musician without being able to sing, but I think a knowledge of singing is very good. And if you're a choral conductor, I think it's really quite vital. I do work as a sort of choral consultant, as it were, for some choirs where their conductors don't have a good knowledge of singing, and that's lovely because it shows that they agree with me and they bring me in. But actually, I think the two are interlinked incredibly closely. Most of my rehearsals are about trying to achieve a particular sound or achieve the ability to sing something that's difficult. And really, the only way to do that is to know about singing. I was really lucky that my first study at college was conducting. So my plan was to be an orchestral conductor, but then I realized that the world needed more tenors than it needed conductors. So I took a place in the opera school at the Royal College of Music, and I came back to conducting a bit later, and I'm not looking back. I think it's my future.
Fantastic.
So that answers your question. I'm not sure, Bob. Sort of.
No. There are very few black and white answers in our profession, stroke hobby, stroke life. So I think that's very good. I mean, when Stephen modestly said that we'd done a passion together. What he omitted to say that the Allegri people will know, but no one else may know, is that he both sang the Evangelist and conducted the entire performance. Which I thought was
Yeah.
when you told me about it to start with, I have to say I was almost horrified, but I was bowled over when I saw it happen. So the proof of
Right.
the pudding. It's
Well,
fantastic.
I'm planning to resurrect that actually with the Sussex Chorus in March, God willing. But actually, I'll be honest with you, the first time I ever performed either of the Passions was the St Matthew Passion, and it was while I was at the Royal College, and I was the tenor soloist, and the evangelist for that performance was Peter Schreier, the great German evangelist, and probably one of the great conductors of the 20th century. And he did exactly this. He surrounded himself with the choir and orchestra and sang the evangelist and used his whole body and his voice and his narrative powers to essentially command the performance from beginning to end. And I thought, that's really quite something. If you can do it, to do it. And I must say, the audience, all the audience that were there, still talk about seeing him do that and how special it was. So, in my modest way, I thought I'd give it a go and see if I could do it too. Looking forward to the second chance at it, actually.
Well, you
And
certainly can, if I may say so.
well, that's kind, thank you. Yeah, it's an unusual idea, but actually, the evangelist is St. John or St. Matthew, and in the recitative sections and in fact some of the accompagnato sections, he is not only conveying the narrative, but he is conducting. The amount of times I want a rehearsal with the continuo when I'm singing Evangelist, just so we can work out how I'm driving them and when they have to wait for me and when they have to give in front of me. And that all is worked out very carefully in rehearsal. And really just adding the choruses and certainly the choruses, but adding the arias as well is just an extension of the same process for a conductor, come singer, evangelist, come narrator, whatever. It's all part of the same thing, a whole really. It is quite a responsibility, I'll admit. If I go wrong, I've only got myself to blame. So you have to know it pretty well.
It must be pretty draining.
Yeah, and energizing too.
Yeah, yeah.
I probably feel it the day after, but certainly I'm ready to do it twice when I do it.
Ah,
Here we go again. I'll quite happily start at the beginning and do it all again. It's very exciting,
it's
very energizing.
remarkable. It's
Thank
amazing.
you. I think I'm the only person doing it now. Peter Schreier has passed away, but other singers should do it too. It's really worthwhile.
I mean, I love your comment about conductors and singing because I think what you're talking about, if I'm right, is the idea of phrasing and line and so on. Whether you have a beautiful voice given by God or not is the roll of the dice, plus a bit
Yes.
of training. But it's not necessarily about being a superb solo singer, but just having a bigger, better understanding.
Yes. And actually, I think in the case of the Passions, they are, I always say that the St. Matthew Passion is the greatest opera never written. And in fact, some people are staging it these days, which just
Mm.
shows its dramatic potential. And in fact, actually, Bach did apply for a job as an opera composer in Mannheim and lost it, but he wasn't chosen. Imagine not having any church music by Bach, but having operas instead. And I think really this was his operatic opportunity, his chance to write that kind of expressive music that he wanted to write, narrative music. So it all falls into place. But yes, you're right. Conducting and singing are, for me, they're entirely linked. If I'm conducting a string orchestra, I still feel like I have to sing passages to get them to understand how I want the intensity in certain parts of the phrase and not in other parts. It's true.
Yeah. I mean, I get I get your thought about um, maybe missing out on a lot of church music by Bach, but just I think had he got that job, maybe the whole development of opera would have changed.
Certainly German opera would have been much more important much earlier. Yes, I mean Handel moved out of Germany into
Mm.
Italy and then eventually, of course, to London. And I think the Germans sort of lost a really good driving force. We don't really do many operas by Telemann, let's face it, although he wrote many. And I think
Gosh.
Bach might have changed that.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
So, all right.
A
So move.
fascinating what if.
What if? So move on a little chronologically,
Mm.
staying geographically where we are. and allow me to move you forward to Brahms.
Yes.
Back and this is back to beauty of line again, isn't it?
Yeah, indeed, actually, and particularly in movement 4 that you are going to be doing. It's an extraordinarily beautiful piece. As I understand it, and you probably correct me if I'm wrong, the words for this are actually by the composer Schütz. I think I'm right in saying that. So they were musically sort of inspired right from the start. I mean, right from the moment that the words were written down, a composer had thought about their musical possibilities. It really is, I think particularly that have very, very long phrases. And this particular movement really does. I mean, all of the phrases are sort of 8 or even 9 bars long, and you don't want to breathe if you can help it in them. I think that's actually quite demanding for a choir. And in fact, I've sung this piece with several professional choirs, and all the singers have been quite exhausted at the end. And it's partly that extra bit of effort that the long phrases take. It takes quite a lot out of you, as well as being quite dramatic and powerful in places as a whole. I mean, this movement's the center of the piece. Originally, it only had 6 movements, the Brahms, and then he added a 7th movement, which meant that this movement became a cornerstone in the piece. And so, yeah, no pressure. It's quite an important part of the piece.
I was looking around the Zoom screen as you were talking about long phrases, and I saw 1 or 2 very broad smiles, especially from Liz Marks, for example, because we had our first online rehearsal last night,
Very
and
good.
there was quite a lot of discussion about the length of phrases.
Yes,
We,
it's long, isn't it? It
yeah,
really is.
it's
And
tough.
And actually, he writes the phrases in what, if you just take the melody line, the soprano line, in what I call an operatic arch. The great opera composers, Italian opera composers particularly, if you look at their music, always has an arch. So Puccini, for instance, it'll build to a moment and then come away, and always there's a high note at that expressive moment. And this is also true of this Brahms. You'll find these arches the whole time, and so you really have to pace yourself and find a way to gain the right breath and the right intensity at the right moment, and then sort of not be clapped out at the end and not finish the phrase. There are some technical issues in it, but it's very much worth overcoming and mastering, to say.
I mean, I can't tell you how much that, if it's not too corny, to say that is music to my ears.
Good.
um, because what we do on the Camino is that we take a piece and we do end up with a video and audio recording of it, but that's only the sort of the middle third of the project. There's lots of other things going on all around it, which
Yes,
makes it a bit more interesting, a bit more interactive.
fantastic.
But
Great.
when we
Yeah.
come to the recording,
Mm.
we have to face up to the fact it is a remote situation, and there are lots of negatives from that point of view.
Yes.
But there are also positives because it's possible to cheat.
Right.
So, for example,
That-
in the long Brahms
That's not
phrases
music to
that
know.
you've
That's not.
nailed completely, what we will be doing, which we did on the previous step in the Loc Assiste,
Yep.
is that in a very detailed sectional rehearsal, we can plan where every single member of the choir is going to breathe in a staggered phrase.
Very clever.
And so it's absolutely precise. 1 or
Mm.
2 of the tenors, especially, got very grumpy in the in the foray on just day, because it meant I was asking them to breathe in a very unmusical place
Yes.
individually, in order that the whole would
Yes.
drive and really create the arch that you're talking about.
Yeah, so they have to sacrifice their own sort of musical ambitions for the whole.
Yeah, well,
Very noble.
well,
Um,
it's the balance
yeah.
between amateurism and professionalism.
Well, I suppose, I mean, it is possible to learn how to sing long phrases, and of course that doesn't help you in the short term. But I do urge, it's really worth doing. And I say again, do look at the arches, because the easiest music to sing in the world. People often say to me, "What's your favorite opera roll?" And every time I think of one, it tends to be by an Italian, just because they quite often, probably because of their own language, understand how to make things easy for the voice and to make things very singable. It's not completely always the case, a bit of a generalization, but people always, talk about Puccini and Verdi, but actually this idea of arches in phrases goes all the way back to the early polyphony of Palestrina. You'll find them there too. And actually, the Brahms is a really good example of a composer writing in that style. It's quite Italianate.
Mm.
Yeah. And it's good part writing as well, because everybody feels like they have the tune, which is quite rare.
The only danger of that is that everybody then wants to sing out and dominate. So you have to
Of course,
just be a little
absolutely.
bit.
But we're very lucky with the language, because actually the German in this movement is extremely expressive. And if you just think of the two first words, wie lieblich, this wie and lieblich are already lovely closed vowels. So there's a lot of very nice resonance and harmonic overtones in these e vowels. And actually, anyone here who's taking part, who wants to sing, just try to find a sort of U in that E, wie lieblich, and you immediately make this very small place, which will create overtones, which will be extremely beautiful. I mean, it's very nicely written. He then, gives you a lovely von and a nice open on the very first build, the first of the two arches. It's fantastic writing. I mean, it's a gift for singing. But the problem is, of course, if everybody's parts feels like the tune, then you're quite right. It feels even more devastating to have to stop in the middle of it when you're singing. Practice doing it. See if you can get through all 9 bars of the first phrase. And if you can, then you can sing the whole thing.
This is again really resonant for us because the whole basis of the Camino as a project is a partnership between Matt and I, and we started off. I don't think we were in contact at the time. I had COVID particularly badly in March,
I didn't know that.
and just managed to stay out of hospital twice.
Wow.
Took a long while to get over that for energy levels, and even when I got my energy level back, I was looking around at the world and getting depressed because it was depressing, not because I was depressed. It's just awful. I keep saying to people, it's okay to be depressed when everything's horrible and depressing around you. That's just reacting to it.
And I
Matt,
imagine also the loss of music is somewhat a bit of a depression as well. I mean, you're used to throwing yourself into something so joyous as making music. It must be very difficult.
So
if you're already struggling.
so Matt kept on ringing me up about every 2 weeks, saying, "Come on, let's do an online project." And there are quite a lot of pretty ropey online projects around that. It's be fair to say, and the whole process is pretty dispiriting anyway. If you only do that little singing into your iPhone thing, and then eventually we sort of knocked around a few ideas and we came up with this particular concept. And I went from sleeping 9 hours a night with a 2-hour nap in the afternoon, because that's what my body told me I needed. And we went from there. The Matt and I and our marketing guy worked 7 days solidly, 12 hours a day, and launched the first step. And that was the tonic for me. It was actually the engagement with music and work that really sort of got me back onto the hobby horse, as it were.
And I'm sure everybody who's taking part feels like it's a tonic for them too. I mean, it's the opportunity of singing. The Allegri singers, we managed to have one rehearsal last Wednesday, because it's a very large church that we rehearse in, and we managed to get 16 people properly distanced with a proper risk assessment. And actually our chairman Will worked terribly hard to make that happen. And then of course the government rules changed slightly, and the church says we can't do it. But for that one rehearsal, 16 people genuinely felt like they were doing something again. And I can't tell you how important it is that we do keep singing. And even if it's, these sort of projects are marvelous for keeping singing. But a lot of people are saying to me, gosh, the voice is really rusty. And I think it is worth finding some time each day just to vocalize and do a bit of singing. And I'm sure
I'm looking at a Cheshire cat called Matthew Buswell, because your combination of skills are incredible. We have to split those tasks between us. So Matt, as you know, is a professional opera singer, and so
Yeah.
everything you're talking about, the Germanic pronunciation, the vowels, the lines,
Mm.
all those things, are just reinforcing totally to all our people everything that Matt's
Sure.
been saying for the last 3 months. And
Thrilled
in
to hear
fact,
that.
tomorrow we're launching Matt. Matt is launching a Matt. Tell us, it's a warm up video or something.
So evening everybody. I've created basically a 2 session 20-25 minute video for lower voices and for higher voices. So we will have a Zoom session tomorrow evening where sopranos and tenors will be together. I basically share screen the pre-recorded video, but then that video is then available for our pilgrims every day if they want for the rest of this step, so they can have a kind of guided warm-up. Because it is, you're absolutely true. A lot of people have come to me on the Camino and other work that I've done, and I felt definitely myself, or I'm a bit rusty, and sometimes we get into the mentality that we think we're rusty, but actually we're not as bad as we think we are, and we're being taken out of context, which makes it more difficult. But everything that you're saying is brilliant, and yes, I would definitely encourage people to, just as an experiment, sing those phrases. Yeah.
Yes, just it's
Brilliant.
the muscle memory needs to be reminded. You know, when we're used to singing, then it's constantly being the memory of the muscles is being reminded the whole time. And when you stop for a bit, it really can be hard to get that memory back into the muscles. So I'm sure Matt's videos are exactly what we want. I produced a short one for Sussex Chorus and the Allegris, and I'm hoping that they're using it every day. It's just 10 minutes. Please don't let me down.
And the best thing that someone ever said to me, actually, do you know Anthony Legg, who was head of the opera at the Academy?
His man whose name is Body Parts.
His wife was my speech teacher when I was at the RCM, actually. And the best thing that she said to me was, Matt, you need to realize she's frightfully posh. That when we speak in life, it's an unconscious, we regulate our own airflow. It's only when we go to sing that we run out of air, because we move it from the unconscious to the conscious, which is where practice is key. Because if when you're taking that breath, you know where you're going to, you can regulate that breath and you can end up singing a 9-bar phrase. But it's only when you don't prepare. I'm speaking to you now and I'm not running out of air. I could keep going, but somehow when we go to sing, we go, it's a minim. I'm not going to be able to do that. Actually, if you do that,
when you... This Brahms movement is an inspired choice for that, because that first phrase actually teaches you pretty much everything you're going to need to know. I mean, there's a place on Sabaoth which is just perfect. If you can get there without breathing, then actually it's very easy just to do the Sabaoth at the end. You just repeat. It's a really good choice, actually. I really recommend practicing that, because you will learn a lot about your breath control by doing that.
Well, our pilgrims actually chose it, because we give our pilgrims a short list. So that's down to them, not us. So well done, guys.
I remember the first time I sang the piece was when I was a student at the Royal College and David Hill conducted. And I remember moaning to my singing professor, who was head of department, which was quite handy, and saying, listen, you won't let me study these late roles of Puccini and even Wagner, but what's the difference? Look at these lines.
Absolutely.
Look how difficult this is to sing.
Stephen, was that Neil?
That was Neil Mackie, yes.
Was it Neil?
And he said, well, just mime. Just make sure you're there for the young ones to be inspired. That was his answer. But actually, it's hard, yeah. It's a really rewarding, but quite exhausting thing for all singers. I don't think Brahms intended it that way. I think he thought it would be a lovely lullaby. He called the piece a human requiem, which is rather sweet, rather than a German requiem, and changed the name when he found out that Schumann had planned a piece of the same name. But it's a wonderful piece, isn't it? Isn't it just glorious?
Absolutely. And I think the brilliant thing about this is actually we can take it out of context. I think it's nice to actually focus, okay, if you've just sung the previous movements and you've got the rest to go, you've really got to pace yourself in a different way. Whereas actually our singers can really enjoy the fact that they've only got to sing this movement. I say only, a lot of them are rolling their eyes. But...
I'm sure.
Well, there we have another perfect example of how to cheat when you're doing online things. We're going to be recording it in two halves,
Okay, great.
so that people don't have to make a complete 6 minute perfect
Okay.
take.
My obsession about a lot of people are asking, or have often asked me about being a singer conducting choirs, and I always say the same thing, which is the principal difference between people who earn their living from singing and fully trained and those who don't, is that people who have had full vocal training just understand how to produce vowels that are resonant. And if you learn how to produce the 5 Italian vowels properly, everyone as a community, and we all sing R, E, in the same place, then the whole choir immediately sounds completely different. It's extraordinary. I mean, I recommend just trying a phrase, doing this, and just sing it like that, so you can't move the jaw, and just sing a whole phrase like that, and the difference of sound will be just overwhelming. It's really worth it. The Italians, of course, do it from birth, but we can Italianate ourselves. And that's true when singing German. The vowels are all Italian, except for the and the U, which the Italians don't have, but they're in our language anyway. Recommend.
Great. This is so so enjoyable, so resonant.
Me too.
And I mean, just it's a passion. We share, the three of us, the 35, the 70, how many people there are, we just share a passion, and it's finding a way to make that work.